everyone, it's Wednesday and you're watching Within the Frame. I'm Kim Bo-kyung. A number of well-known celebrities in South Korea are being grilled over drug use. The entertainment industry is anxious over the fallout from it. Among them is Lee Sun-kyun, an actor from the Oscar-winning movie Parasite. He's under investigation for alleged use of an unspecified drug. This came not just long after another actor Yoo Ah-in's case this year March, who is on trial for illegal use of propofol. With film stars such as those being involved in drug-related investigations, the film industry that has already been struggling is facing another challenge. How is the movie scene right now, and are such drug scandals affecting the industry's image? For this, we invited Professor Jae Soh, professor from Seoul Institute of the Arts, who is also a filmmaker. Welcome, Professor Soh.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being with us. And we also have Professor Jason Betchervais, professor from Kyungdong University, who is also a film critic. Good to see you again, Professor Betchervais.
Hello, and thank you for having me, all the way from Wonju today.
Welcome. All right, well, first question to our Professor Soh. Let's start with much lighter news than the drug scandal. Marvel Studios' much anticipated superhero flick, The Marvels, hit the local theaters today. What is this film about?
It's actually a sequel to Captain Marvel from 2019. And what they did was they combined that with what's on Disney Plus, which is also Miss Marvel. It's kind of more of a younger version of the show. So it's a combination of three Miss Marvel characters basically doing it. And it has Brie Larson, Tiona Paris, and Iman Vellani. And this is, I believe, the sort of a sequel to the 2019 version and also the 33rd MCU movie to come out. And of course, you know, we have a Korean actor, Park Seo-joon, in it. So, you know, it starts today in Korea. So basically, there's a lot of anticipation for it. But I do believe that the pre-sales for the movie is kind of, it's not up to par. And I think the reason maybe even in Korea there's fatigue for superhero movies is what I, you know, surmise. But we'll see if the movie, you know, has a really good story and it really hits the audiences, it might do well.
Yeah, we'll see. Well, our professors already mentioned, but Jason, the film was highly anticipated also in that actor Park Seo-joon from hit Korean series Itaewon Class and the movie Parasite starred in the film. Now, as far as I know, he became the third Korean actor to join the Marvel Cinematic Universe, right?
Yeah, that's right. It follows on from Claudia Kim. She starred in The Avengers Age of Ultron for 2015. That was a movie that was actually shot in Seoul. It was a huge box office, gargantuan box office hit. And then there's also Madong-seok, or Don Lee, who is in The Eternals, that was released a couple of years ago, I think. And yeah, that didn't do all that well critically. It wasn't as well received as some of the other Marvel films. It sold around about $400 million, or generated $400 million in ticket sales. So that's not a bad tally, I suppose, compared to many other films out there, especially during the COVID pandemic. But I mean, as Professor Son mentioned, there is, I think, somewhat, well, definitely a tangible sense of fatigue when it comes to Marvel films. It's my impression that it peaked a few years ago with Endgame, and since then, and also Black Panther, and since then there's kind of been a downward trajectory in terms of the Marvel films that have been released here in Korea and also overseas. And ticket sales are just, for this film, you'd expect with a Korean actor, Park Seo-joon, you know, in the film, you'd expect ticket sales to be really quite strong, and reservations so far are suggesting that it's going to have a somewhat soft opening. We'll find out later on today or early tomorrow how well it's done on its opening day, but it's just not looking to do as well, and I think people are just fed up with Marvel. They've just seen this thing time and time again. And, you know, I'm going to watch it tomorrow morning, but I'll be honest with you, I'm not on the edge of my seat, you know, in excitement wanting to see this film. It's just, you know, it just feels like we're stuck in this kind of, I don't know, almost this black hole where we're trapped in this Marvel universe. And all we see is, you know, these characters are going from one universe to another and different time, you know, using different kind of you're obviously using their superpowers and time travel and all the rest of it. It's just not exciting anymore.
Right, I see your point, Professor Jae. Well, we'll have to see how it unfolds. Well, but Professor Soh, Park and other actors from the Marvels are reportedly doing no other, promotional activities, and some say this is because the SAG-AFTRA strike continues into late this year. Is this right?
Yeah. So it's not because Park Seo-joon doesn't want to do the promotions. I'm sure his company really wants to promote him, especially it's exciting to be in a MCU universe as a foreign national. But I think, as you know, SAG-AFTRA is basically representation of almost all the Hollywood actors that we know of today. Screen Actors Guild is what SAG stands for, and AFTRA is another union of the acting. And right now they're trying to negotiate for a lot of things, including higher pay. They feel like because of streaming, the old model where an actor would be on an episodic television show or a movie and they would just keep getting residual payment, it kind of went out the window with streaming, because streaming doesn't really tell you exactly how much a show did in terms of box office numbers or Nielsen ratings. So the actors are really angry that they've been kind of cut out of the profits for a lot of these shows. So the strike is on its way, but I hear that the director's coming, because directors aren't really represented by SAG-AFTRA. The Directors Guild of America actually negotiated with the powers that be, and they made sort of their own kind of compromise there. So it'll do it. But I think Park Seo-joon's company is kind of looking to see if Marvel says okay and Hollywood is okay about it. But I'm sure he would love to be out there promoting the movie.
Yeah, I can see that. Well, we started out by talking about the Marvels, but let's also talk about other films as well. Professor Jae, before the superhero film hit the theaters, what other movies were attracting moviegoers?
Yeah, no, I think it's been interesting looking at the box office over the last few weeks and few months. Certainly, it hasn't really been very impressive in terms of Korean films, although there has been the Love Reset comedy that's done very well, sold over, I think, 2 million tickets. Japanese animations have done really well in Korea this year. That's definitely been a trend. The Boy and the Heron, the latest kind of Studio Ghibli animation, which has sold, I think, 1.5 million admissions by Hayao Miyazaki. And I haven't seen that yet, but it does follow on from the success of other animations that we've seen this year, including Zuzemi and also the first Slam Dunk that did really, really well earlier on in the year. And also, we've seen the Disney's Elemental that sold well over, I think, 6 million tickets this year. So there's clearly an appetite for animation out there. And I think as we look back at 2023, I think the success of animation or animated films will stand out. And unfortunately, Korea doesn't have a thriving animated film industry. So in that sense, it has been struggling somewhat. We've got The Boys by Chung Ji-young, which I haven't seen yet. That actually premiered at the Busan Film Festival last year. So it's taken a year for the film to get released. I haven't seen it. So I'm quite keen to watch the film. It stars Seo Gyeong-gu, directed by Chung Ji-young. He's a very well-established filmmaker. He's been making films in the 80s and 90s, and he's behind the hits such as Unbound and also Black Market. So that hasn't been doing all that well. But there's been, following on from the Chuseok period as well, we saw Kim Ji-yoon's Cobweb that didn't do very well in cinemas. So the Chuseok period saw Korean films struggle, kind of following on from the summer. We did get some successes. We've got the Smugglers, which is one of the kind of few Korean films to break even this year. We also had Sleep, which came later on, that also broke even. But only, I think, 4 or 5 Korean films have actually made money at the box office in Korea, which I think just underscores the difficulty that Korean films are facing in cinemas right now.
Right, so it seems many of the South Korean movies were released recently, but not many of them were able to see good scores. Right, well, Professor Soh, among the many films our Professor Jae Soh already mentioned was romantic comedy 30 Days, although he didn't mention the name. And this stars actors Kang Han-il and Jung So-min and has been enjoying its popularity, and it even became the 5th Korean film to pass the break-even point this year. Why is it so popular?
Well, it's not a huge hit, but I think considering how, as Jason pointed out, there's so many movies that are doing so badly, just to break even seems like it's good news.
Yeah.
But I think my personal opinion about why it's doing well is because the premise is really simple. It's about a couple who's going through a divorce. They have a 30-day countdown till the day they get divorced, and they get in a car accident and they lose their memory.
Oh.
So the comic premise is a really good, simple premise. And I think right now, because of there's like wars happening in Israel, there's like Ukraine, also the economy and the inflation being up. I think comedies usually do well when the economy is doing badly. Just in terms of world cinema history, basically when the Big Depression in the U.S., there are a lot of golden musicals and comedies coming out of that era. So I think it just kind of hit the zeitgeist. A lot of people are kind of want to go to the theaters and watch something to forget about how bad life is right now. So I think that's one of the reasons that it's done well. And also, and we talked about fatigue for Marvel movies, but there's also a fatigue for like basically movies with gangsters and politicians, which there's been a whole slew of them coming out. So I think a movie about a silly couple, I think, just kind of like hit everybody's kind of nobody went expecting much, but I think they were very happily, surprised by the story of the movie.
Right. So simple comedy was the aspect that attracted many moviegoers, I guess.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, Professor Jae Soh, other than 30 Days, Korean films that have recently been released were struggling, like you said before. As a matter of fact, live concert movies are enjoying more popularity than films, some say. Why is this?
Yeah, I would say that the English title for 30 Days, it's really confusing because there are always so many kind of English titles floating around when it comes to Korean films. It's called Love Reset. So I think that was what I mentioned earlier. So it is a little bit confusing. And yeah, it's now the 5th film to break even. So thank you for mentioning that. So not many movies that have actually surpassed that point. But yeah, going on to, looking at concert films. Now I actually catalog all the releases that are hit cinemas in Korea. And as I've been looking at the films that have been hitting screens, concert films have actually not only been doing pretty well, but there's just been so many of them. 1 or 2 concert films that are released a month, and this is a trend that began, I think, not necessarily began in the pandemic, but it's certainly seen more concert films being released during COVID-19 the COVID-19 pandemic, because there just weren't any other films in theaters. But I think the Taylor Swift concert film has done extraordinarily well in cinemas in North America, and we've also seen films such as BTS yet to come in cinemas, which actually I think that was the first kind of concert film to surpass $40 million at the box office. And I think what you've got here, I think you've got obviously K-pop stars, you've got this part of the industry which has just done so well, not just here in Korea, but overseas. And, these are well-established stars that have huge draws at the box office. I mean, the star system has changed in Korea, but I think when it comes to K-pop stars, that's certainly something that audiences find appealing. And then we've also got the technology, and this is something that's not really talked about, actually. And I think this is something that's somewhat overlooked, is that Korea has this incredibly advanced theatrical circuit, in terms of the cinemas here. And they pioneered technology, including ScreenX and 4DX and various other forms. And this kind of technology is well suited to concert films. And so one of the reasons these films are performing so well, and we saw this actually with the Avatar film, which is obviously not a concert film, but people are going to watch these films in premium formats, and as a result, they're actually making even more money. So I think that's part of the reason they're so popular. Is yes, you've got these popular singers, these well-established artists, but you've also got these cinemas that are actually ideal for watching concert films.
All right, I see. So there are so many reasons why we need to go to theaters to watch live concert films. But unfortunately, like we have already mentioned, other than certain films, other films are quite struggling. And what's making matters worse is that South Korea's film industry is being hurt by recent drug scandals involving big celebrities such as Lee Sun-kyun and previously Yooahin. How many dramas or movies were they involved in, and how much damage did these scandals affect?
Well, Lee Sun-kyun, as you know, he's famous for, he's already a star in Korea, but he's world famous for being in Parasite.
Yeah.
He was in an Apple TV series called Dr. Brain, which was basically did one season, and he shot the second season of that, which is about to come out in November. So now I think Apple's kind of worried. And then also he was in a movie called Project Silence. So these are projects that he already had shot that are about to kind of come out into the theaters or, play on, OTTs. But I'm sure it's going to really affect sort of, first of all, like, will audiences flock to see it? That's like a question it's a big question mark. Also, they spend a lot of money on these projects. And for example, Dr. Brain, that's Apple TV, and they put a lot of care into production values and things like that. And then Yooahin, his case has gone on for a very long time, and it's affecting basically, I think there's a movie he did called High Five, which is about to come out, which was already shot. And then there's a project, they shot the first season, Hellbound, which Netflix has officially dropped him. Well, his character kind of dies in the first episode, in the first season. So I don't think if they maybe wanted to kind of have him come back, but they've already dropped him for this purpose. And then I believe there's a thing called Goodbye Earth, which is another series, like a sci-fi thing that he's about to come out that's been shot. So yeah, it definitely puts a damper in terms of if you want to do promotions on new material that's coming out and then your star is involved in a scandal. It's not really good news for the entertainment business in a sense. But, as we're going to talk about later, I think right now the drug thing seems like the major news item and all the media is really sort of like fascinated by the stuff that's happening. I think Lee Sun-kyun's case is a little different from Yooahin. Yooahin, it seems like it's like a very slow burning kind of scandal that happened earlier, but it's months later and we're still talking about it. Lee Sun-kyun is more about basically he even tested negative on his drug test, and he was using sort of, I don't know if you could call it lighter drugs, but marijuana and things like that. So he also claims that he didn't really know that it was happening. So the two cases are really different, and I think maybe the audiences or Korean society will look at them differently. But right now, the focus is in Korean society is about all this like drug use. The government, President Yoon Suk-yeol actually announced that Korea is no longer a drug-free. So it's something that's happening with the youth, even as early as I heard in middle school and high school in Korea. So I think it's a worldwide phenomenon. Korea is very strict about all this drug stuff. As you know, if you're caught, you could face up, basically from a minimum of 6 months to 14 years in jail. It's a very strict country about that, whereas I think in the United States, there's a different view of it, especially with drugs like fentanyl, which was, it's a drug that prescribed by doctors, basically, at one point, really made destroyed a lot of people's lives. So you have recreational drugs, of course, but in Europe and America, this problem has persisted for a very long time. And the way society looks at it over there is much different from the way Korean society looks at it, or most Asian societies. We're much stricter. So I hope that it kind of blows over for the sake of, the topic is how, is this going to have a negative impact on the Korean entertainment business? And it seems like it is right now, but it's doing so badly. This is not going to help, So those are things that I'm worried about.
Well, you have already mentioned how Lee Sun-kyun, both of the Lee Sun-kyun and Yooahin are very well-known actors, even in the global society. And I'd like to ask you, some say that this could even damage the South Korean film industry's reputation. What's your view on this?
Personally, I don't think so, because they do represent, they're the face of what people watch. If Squid Game happened and let's say one of the actors from Squid Game was involved in a drug scandal, I think everybody would know about it. But at the same time, it really depends on which global audience finds out about that. I think if it's like in the United States and they find out the type of drugs they used, and it's such common stuff. I mean, if you think about somebody's career like Robert Downey Jr., who plays Iron Man, that guy went to jail and came back after so much drug use, rehabilitated himself, and now he's like a world star, right? So we don't have this culture where we give forgiveness to people that do this. It's very strict, and government doesn't really have systems in place where if an actor or celebrity or just a normal person gets hooked on drugs, there's no process to go kind of rehabilitate yourself and find sort of a second chance in life. And this is something the government's looking into right now. But just because you do something and you're punished for it, I think a lot of times right now, what I'm finding is social media is working at its negative impact fullest, because people are kind of, looking at this kind of in a weirdly, they're getting off on all this bad press. And if you look at anything from, in Korea, it would be like Kakao or any of the, like Instagram or any of the things. In the States would be, X or Twitter. They're just blowing up with people just kind of finding old videos of people in interviews and saying, I think he was on drugs on that. I mean, it's this kind of really perverted sense of what just a few of these kind of netizens are doing that's spreading out and causing the mainstream news to be picking up on it. So personally, I don't think it will blow over, but right now it seems like the focus is on this right now.
Well, it's quite reassuring to hear that this kind of scandals are not going to have much impact on the South Korean film industry's reputation. Good to hear. But Professor Jason, I'd like to ask you this last question quite briefly. Even if, Lee's case is one of several signs that South Korea is struggling with, illegal drugs cases. And we cannot guarantee that there won't be any second Yooahin or second Lee Sun-kyun, right? In what ways should Korean film industry minimize such an impact?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to predict, right? I think obviously with the Lee Sun-kyun case, I mean, it's something that's emerged, and you can't predict that. I suppose they write certain conditions into their contracts with their agencies, but I don't know what you do if you've got a film or a drama, and then an actor is engulfed in a scandal, and it's very damaging. It's damaging for the production. It's damaging for everyone involved. And it can be incredibly stressful. So I'm not sure there's much one can do. I mean, it's not something that I think you can necessarily prepare for. With Lee Sun-kyun, we've got Dr. Brain with a season coming up, and he's got films that he's in, and the same for Yooahin, as Professor Sun mentioned. And it's very difficult, and so I honestly don't know what you can do in that situation and how you can handle it. I suppose it's a case of just trying to handle it as well as one can, and seeing what happens as a result.
All right, thank you, Professor Jae Soh. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time we have for today's edition. Thank you, Jason, for your time and insights. We really appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
And Professor Soh, thank you for your time and insights as well. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, that's all for Within the Frame tonight. We'll be back tomorrow with more in-depth stories. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.